My mother-in-law demanded that I start paying rent to live in her house. When I admitted I was broke, she laughed, saying, "You were never good enough for my son." She ordered me to leave by the end of the month. I smiled and said, "You'll regret this decision." The next day, she found out who really owned the house. And her reaction was priceless. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Barbara sat down at the kitchen table with a serious look on her face. "We need to talk," she said. I turned off the stove and sat across from her. "I think it's time you start paying rent," she said bluntly. I was taken aback. "Rent?" But we agreed that we'd help with the house in exchange for living here. She shrugged. "That was then. Things have changed. If you can't afford it, maybe you should find somewhere else to live." I felt a lump in my throat. Mark had recently lost his job, and I was working part-time while finishing my degree. Money was tight. "I'm sorry, but we just can't afford rent right now," I said quietly. Barbara smirked. "I always knew you were never good enough for my son." She stood up and walked away, leaving me stunned. The next day, Barbara handed me a letter. "Consider this your official notice," she said. "You have until the end of the month to move out." I read the letter in disbelief. It was a formal eviction notice. I looked up at her. "Are you serious?" She nodded. "I want you out." I took a deep breath and smiled. "You'll regret this decision." What Barbara didn't know was that, 6 months earlier, Mark and I had purchased the house from her. She had been struggling financially, and we offered to buy the house and let her continue living there. She agreed, and we completed the paperwork. But she never bothered to read the fine print. We allowed her to stay in the house rent-free, but legally, the house was ours. We had the deed, the mortgage statements, and all the necessary documentation. The following morning, I sat down with Barbara and handed her a folder. "What's this?" she asked. "Proof that we own the house," I replied. She opened the folder and began flipping through the documents. Her face turned pale. "This can't be right," she whispered. "It's all there," I said. "You sold us the house. We allowed you to stay here, but if you want us out, then perhaps it's you who should be leaving." She looked up at me, eyes wide with shock. "You tricked me." "No," I said calmly. "You just didn't pay attention." Barbara packed her things and moved out within a week. Mark and I finally had the house to ourselves. It wasn't the outcome we had hoped for, but it was a necessary step for our peace of mind. We renovated the house, turning it into a warm and welcoming space. Our relationship improved without the constant tension. Sometimes, standing up for yourself means making tough decisions. But in the end, it's worth it. A year later, Barbara reached out, asking if she could visit. We agreed, hoping that time had softened her heart. She apologized for her behavior, and we began to rebuild our relationship. It wasn't easy, but forgiveness often isn't. Life has a way of teaching us lessons, sometimes the hard way. But those lessons shape us into who we are meant to be. For a while, everything was quiet. Too quiet. Barbara was gone, and Mark and I finally felt free in our own home. I started a full-time job at a local veterinary clinic in Aurora, and Mark picked up freelance graphic design gigs. Bills were getting paid. We were even saving a little. Then, one Saturday morning, while I was sipping my coffee and looking out the kitchen window, I saw a familiar silver Buick pull into the driveway. Barbara, without warning. No text, no call. She stepped out of the car like she owned the place, hair sprayed into a helmet, purse tucked under her arm like a weapon. My stomach twisted. Mark walked in behind me and froze. "She can't just show up like this." I nodded. "We're about to find out why she did." Barbara rang the doorbell, even though she used to barge in. Progress, I guess. I opened the door slowly. She smiled, but her eyes were cold. "Can we talk?" Mark joined me at the door. "What do you want, Mom?" She walked right past us into the living room. Same old Barbara. "I met someone," she said as she sat down. I didn't respond. Just waited. He's in real estate, she added. Says he can help me get the house back. I blinked. What? Barbara turned to us, smug. He says if I can prove I was tricked, I can get the house returned to me legally. Maybe even sue. Mark laughed, but I wasn't smiling. You signed everything, Barbara, I said calmly. You were behind on property taxes. You begged us to help you. I was emotional. I didn't know what I was signing. I leaned forward. That's not our fault. She stood. We'll see what the court says. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived. Barbara was suing us for unlawful acquisition of property. Mark was furious. She's out of her mind. But I wasn't surprised. Barbara never liked losing. Especially to me. We hired a lawyer. Every night became a paperwork marathon, digging up emails, texts, mortgage records, even the old voicemail where she literally said, "Thank you for buying the house." I feel relieved. Our lawyer, Ms. Powell, was sharp as a blade. She told us, Barbara doesn't have a case, but she's going to make this painful. And she did. She showed up to court with her new boyfriend, Frank. Real estate guy. Flashy suit, loud voice. He tried to smear me, said I manipulated Barbara, that I seduced Mark for the house. It was disgusting. But we had facts. Receipts. Witnesses. Barbara's old friend from church even testified she knew about the sale. Just when it looked like the court case was wrapping up, things took a darker turn. One morning, I found our backyard gate wide open. The lock was broken. Mark's tools were gone. Our trash bins had been turned over and filled with raw meat. We called the cops, but there was little they could do without proof. No cameras, no fingerprints. The worst came a week later. A dead squirrel nailed to our front door. I didn't scream, I just stood there, staring at it, heart pounding. Someone was trying to scare us. Mark rushed out, pulled it down, and we called the police again. They took it more seriously this time. Said they'd patrol more often. Still, I couldn't sleep for days. Then one night, Mark came home looking pale. I found something, he said, holding up a yellow envelope. Inside were copies of old documents, letters between Barbara and her deceased husband. One letter made my blood run cold. It mentioned a hidden account in Mark's name. Apparently, when Mark was a baby, his grandparents left him a trust. One that Barbara had managed ever since. Mark didn't even know it existed. Why would she hide this? He asked, voice shaking. She's afraid of losing control, I said. We brought the documents to Ms. Powell. Her eyes widened. This could change everything. If Barbara misused Mark's trust fund, she could face legal consequences. We amended our court case. Instead of just defending the home, we filed a counterclaim, demanding a full audit of the trust account. Barbara's reaction was explosive. She screamed in court, had to be escorted out by security. Frank tried to calm her down, but even he looked rattled. Within 2 weeks, they dropped their lawsuit. Too late. The court ordered a forensic audit. Turns out Barbara had drained nearly $85,000 from Mark's trust over the years, using it to pay off credit cards, book cruises, and buy designer purses. She could have gone to jail, but Mark didn't press charges. He just wanted her out of our lives. Just when we thought it was over, the past knocked again. Literally. A man showed up at our door one stormy Tuesday, late 50s, wore a faded leather jacket, and held a small black folder. Are you Mark? He asked when my husband opened the door. I am, Mark said, cautious. I'm Richard. I knew your dad. That stopped Mark cold. My dad's been dead for years, Mark said. Richard nodded. Yeah, but he and I were partners. I have something you need to see. He handed over the folder. Inside was a letter. Handwritten. Dated 1998. Signed by Mark's father. The words were shaky but clear. If anything happens to me, Barbara should not get a cent. The money belongs to Mark. Attached were bank records, an account we never knew existed, with over $100,000 still sitting in it. We brought the letter and documents to Ms. Powell. Her eyes nearly popped out of her head. This changes everything. Turns out, Mark's father had set up a separate fund, a backup in case Barbara ever got greedy. And she did. But she'd never found this account. It was in Mark's name, and thanks to Richard, it was about to be transferred. That money was a godsend. We used some of it to finally finish the home renovations we dreamed of. We put the rest in savings. But the biggest surprise? Richard. After a few dinners with Richard, the truth began to unfold. He wasn't just Mark's dad's friend. He was Mark's uncle, half-brother to Mark's dad, kept secret for years after a messy family falling out. But when Barbara kicked Mark out emotionally, Richard had stepped in from the shadows. He'd been watching for years, quietly keeping tabs on Barbara's antics. "Your father was a good man," Richard said one night. "But he trusted the wrong woman." Mark sat quiet for a moment. "You knew she'd try something, didn't you?" Richard nodded. "She always wanted power. Now she's losing it." We didn't hear from Barbara for 3 months. Then, out of nowhere, she showed up again, this time outside Mark's work. She waited until he got off and followed him to his car. "I'm your mother," she shouted, blocking his door. "You owe me everything." Mark didn't raise his voice, just looked her dead in the eyes. "You stole from me, tried to evict my wife, then dragged me to court. I don't owe you anything." She broke down sobbing right there in the parking lot. People stared. Someone called security. Mark walked away. It should have felt good, but it just felt sad. Weeks passed. One rainy weekend, we started clearing out the attic. Behind a loose wall panel, I found a yellowed envelope wedged in the beams. It was addressed to whoever finds this. Inside was a note from Mark's grandfather, dated 1962. It described Barbara, called her manipulative, two-faced, dangerous. It warned of her behavior, even said he feared for his son, Mark's dad, if he ever married her. The note ended with, "Protect the next generation. Don't let her hurt them the way she hurt us." It gave me chills. We hadn't heard from Frank, Barbara's sketchy boyfriend, since the court case ended. But one day, a woman came into my clinic with a dog. She looked tired, stressed. We chatted. She casually mentioned she used to date a real estate guy named Frank. Described him to AT. I asked if he was still in the business. She laughed. "Nope. Got arrested last month. Mortgage fraud. Real slimeball." I nearly dropped my clipboard. Barbara really knew how to pick them. One evening, Mark got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. From Barbara. It was short. No apologies. No begging. Just one line. "You'll regret turning your back on family." Mark burned it in the fireplace without saying a word. And that was that. We didn't tell many people about the trust fund or the secret bank account. Some things were better left quiet. But we did use a little to buy the house next door when it went up for sale. Guess who we gave it to? Richard. He moved in last fall and has Sunday dinner with us every week now. He's the family Mark always needed. The one who stayed. Barbara? Last we heard, she moved in with her sister in Florida. No one's really heard from her since. Not even her church friends. It was almost peaceful. Mark and I had settled into a rhythm. The house felt like ours, warm, safe, ours. Richard had become like a father to both of us. Even our dog, Moose, seemed happier. But peace has a way of making you forget that storms can still roll in. That storm's name? Barbara. It came in the mail. A black envelope with silver trim. Real fancy. Too fancy. Inside was a funeral announcement for Barbara's sister, Margaret. The one she was living with in Florida. And at the bottom, in Barbara's handwriting, "You may not want me, but blood is blood. You're still expected." Mark tossed it aside. "I'm not going." But something made me pause. "Let's go," I said. Mark looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. But something in my gut said this wasn't over. We flew to Tampa. Rented a car. Drove to the old church where the funeral was being held. Barbara didn't speak to us, barely looked at us. But I caught her whispering to an older man with a crooked smile. He kept glancing over at us. During the wake, that same man bumped into me by accident. "Hope you kept the house locked," he muttered. My blood went cold. We left early, drove straight to the airport, booked the first flight back. When we got home, the lights were off. The front door slightly open. Mark rushed in. The living room had been torn apart. Couch cushions slashed. Picture frames shattered. Papers everywhere. But the worst part? The small fire still burning in our office. It hadn't spread far, thanks to the fire-resistant flooring we'd installed a few months ago. But the damage was clear. Someone had tried to destroy everything. Police came. Said it looked personal. We knew who it was. They found fingerprints on the back door. Barbara's. She'd broken in. She'd tried to burn us out of our own life. Barbara was arrested. This time, she didn't get out of it. She tried to claim she was driven by grief, that she'd just lost control. But the evidence was too strong. The judge didn't hold back. 2 years in prison. No early release. A restraining order for life. And before she was taken away, she turned and hissed at me in front of everyone. "You stole everything from me." I didn't flinch. I just said, "You gave it away." I'd love to say I walked away clean, that I was the innocent hero in all of this. But the truth? I did push Barbara more than I should have. I smiled when she was hurting. I let my pride grow bigger than my peace. I could have walked away early on, left the house, let Mark sort it out. But I wanted to win, and I did. But winning has a price. 6 months later, Barbara sent us one last letter from prison. It was handwritten, shaky, angry, but honest. "I have nothing left," she wrote. "Not my house, not my son, not my dignity. Maybe I deserved it. But you weren't innocent either." She was right. I kept that letter, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Today, our house stands taller than ever. But it holds the weight of everything we went through. The rooms whisper of fights. The walls remember courtrooms. The floors know the heat of revenge. Mark forgave Barbara. I haven't. Maybe one day. But for now, we live in the house we fought for. And every time I walk past the fireplace where her letter turned to ash, I remember the day I smiled and said, "You'll regret this decision." And oh, how right I was.